Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Modular. Today we're playing with the Gamechanger Plasma Voice. This thing is alive. It's full of energy, overflowing with energy. You've got this plasma sparking between these two electrodes. This kind of compulsive therapy of shocks running through the sound, generating these waveforms, exploding them, pulling them apart, reforming them, and delivering them to you as a squelch of sheer energy. There's nothing quite like it. Not heard anything quite like it. I mean, maybe things that have been forced through the plasma distortion pedal or distortion module. Yeah, possibly, because it's that tone. It's that tone from Gamechanger that brings this fizz, this spit, this anger, this emotional disaster to the tone. You know, can you find some kind of sweet sine wave in there? No, you can't. It's going to rip your face off, man, and stuff it back down your throat. It's all about the discharge. It's all about the exchange, the morphing of one form of matter into another. It's about these miniature explosions of light which arc themselves from one spot to another. It is the spark of life. It is that energy that's within all living things. Surely. Maybe to overstate it a little. It's a physical sound, a visceral sound, a sort of sound that can dribble out the side of yourself while at the same time giving you a big gash into the side of your head while rummaging around in your insides and exploring places it really shouldn't. I feel my descriptions have just gone somewhere else entirely. But in this video, we're going to explore the plasma voice a little bit, because it has this edge, it has this danger to it. But part of that danger is being just one thing, of being this spitball of angry sound. And I don't think that's all it. I think it can be so much more. It is that. I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that it's an explosion within a Xenon tube of stuff. I mean, that is obviously going to form the vast majority of its tonal texture, is this flash. But you can do extraordinary things with it. I've had this thing now about 4 months, I think it is, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's taken me a while to get to this point of making a video about it because I didn't fully understand it. I would just enjoyed playing with it, and to do a review I need to be able to speak relatively intelligently about it, and I never quite found the time to get down into some of the details. But the details needn't worry us, because all we really want to know about is what it can do to my rack, how it can inspire me to find and explore different sounds. Can I control that energy? Is it just going to control me? Is it going to overwhelm everything else within my rack? Or is it going to be something that you can drop in that's going to be killer time after time? Maybe or maybe you have to push it in another direction. make it completely unwieldy, make it so you can't contain it, let it explode and fall out and spread all over your desktop. Maybe that's the way to treat it. Or perhaps within it, you will find both the sweet spot and the sour spot. That place of pleasure and that place of pain all wrapped up within a single voice. Enough of this nattering from this distance. Let's bring you in. Let's look closely at it and see if we can work out where the sound's coming from and what you can do to manipulate it in order to get the sort of stuff that you're after. I mean, provided that that's very sparky, very energetic, very overladen with energy. Now, there's a certain amount of comedy involved in it, inevitably, because it's an extraordinary thing discharging this extraordinary energy and power. And it has no end of surprises. Now what I'm doing, how I'm messing with it at the moment, is I've got modulation coming into the CV input here, which is moving all of the sounds around. That's why we're getting this sort of ever-changing vibe of different forms of discharge, different stuff going on. Because within here is like 49 different sounds, different ways that they've put together something which is supposedly useful. Some of them melodic, some of them just out of their minds. So let's stop messing and let's get it down to some basics. Just going to switch off the sound for the moment just so we can spend a little bit of time explaining the front plate to you. So what is going on in here? It's an entire voice. What they've done is they've used their plasma tube, their Xenon tube, to create some kind of audio output. Now it's been interesting because I've watched this develop over a couple of years. It's been like prototypes at shows and stuff like that, and they've sort of shown it, and it's kind of been this mess of, it's been all of the most extreme versions of itself. And I think Gamechanger Audio have had to work really hard to try to find some kind of tone from this. Because applying it as distortion to audio that already exists, that's one thing. But actually generating the audio in the first place, that is something else. And I think that's been difficult. And you can sort of tell by the fact that the plasma voice is just on that edge between perfectly fine and usable and just, I don't know what on earth I can do with this noise. But it's somehow, they've pulled it in enough. They've managed to do it enough to grasp enough usable sound to make it work, and I think that's extraordinarily clever. So they use this as like a starting point, and that falls through some kind of rectification and then is driven by some kind of pulse wave oscillator, I think, which is then modulated by various other sampled waveforms in order to give it difference, variation, changes in tone. That is all happening in here somewhere, and it manifests itself at the front in some relatively understandable terms that enable us to engage with the voice. So we don't actually need to know all the rigmarole that goes on behind the scenes. We just want to play. We just want to play with these sliders, and we want to play with the sounds. Now you can't sort of get to one sound through another, as in I can't change this and it becomes a different sound. It's not as if there's one sound which all of these have been saved as. It's like each sound within a bank is a different approach to stuff behind the scenes they've done to create a voice. So each preset, if you like, is a bit more individual. Each one you get to play with and change and alter, but you don't like have a basic starting point with which you then make other stuff. That's not really how this works, at least in my experience. But let's have a look at what you have. So using the most basic sound, which is the bank one, sound one, which is the bass. mean, it's nice just to start with, and you can see how it how the discharge is forming that. You can see it visually, and that matches with what your ears are hearing. You know it's on the edge of distortion, that it's wobbling about, and it has this electrical spark to it. You've then first of all got a pitch control. So all the time you've got that distorted edge to it. You've then got time, which is essentially an envelope. You can bring it down to a shorter time, up to a long, more sustained time. It's interesting how the output is actually sort of looped. There's a setting within it which you can set to have it to sustain over time through looping itself, or to actually cut off after a short amount of time, which is quite weird, but I'm not going to dwell on that. But suffice to say, on the front of here, you can go from percussive to more legato. Modulation then adds in a little bit of modulation on the pitch. What is also interesting is that each of these controls sort of works differently depending on which patch you're on. So harmonics is easy. That just brings in some higher tones to what's going on. All of it soaked in this electricity. And then flux sort of leans into the distortion rather. Now at the end you've got a filter, which if you push it down, I think it just sort of closes on itself, which can be useful for taking off those edges a bit, just to give you a slightly purer tone. But then if you push it up, it starts to then use the time modulation as a bit of an envelope to it. So you get a more of a filtered sound. Does that make sense? At the top here you've got a bit of EQ and a drive. I've had the drive all the way up so far. So you can increase the bass and treble, take the treble out, take the bass out, put the treble up. I tend to leave the drive somewhere in between. So if I give it a tune, we can find some relatively calm tones in there through using the filter. Obviously you could use the output through another filter if you wanted to sort of double up on what it's doing or have a little bit more control over what the filter's doing. You do have secondary controls along here, like resonance, like the amount of CV through the CV input, the shape of the accent and the accent levels, little things like that I'm not going to particularly go into on this video, just going to keep to the front end. So each of these have got a CV input for modulation, so you can keep changing what's going on. Although I have to say I kind of find it most pleasing when you're doing it yourself. Right, let's go through some more of these different sounds. So you've got 7 banks, as I say: bass, lead, pluck, drum, metal, static and spark, and then you've got 7 sounds within, and they can be quite different. you may notice that none of the sounds have any sort of attack or grace to them. No, they're all explosions. They're all straight in there. It's a completely bam in your face sort of sound at every point. At every point. I mean, you could run it through a VCA and with an envelope create your own sound with that. But from the plasma voice itself, the only sort of time or enveloping you've got is just the length of it. Putting a bit of Turing Machine into the multi-CV input, it's just bliss. Alright, let's move into the next bank, which is lead, which pitches us up a bit, but is otherwise just as juicy. Now, at this point, you could probably say, and I guess quite rightly, that it's a bit samey. It has a tone which is similar, which is definitive, if you like. Which, yeah, it is, because of its nature of generation through this plasma tube. It's always going to have this electrical bite to it. So, I mean, honestly, if that's not your thing, then this certainly is not for you. But I think that the essence of it, the way that the waveforms are falling apart, is just delicious, and it's the sort of thing which you can increase in intensity through the harmonic and flux sliders to the point where you can sort of drop it back in a mix of other stuff going on, and then just make it penetrate so alarmingly that it's just a fantastic change within what you're doing. It is distinctive, and that can work for it because it just really brings itself out and makes itself known, and can also work against it. It just really depends on what you're after. So let's look into some of these other sounds. I mean, the bass and the lead are probably your bread and butter sounds, but from there you can go very much into other things. So the next bank is pluck. can go into drum, which has its own thing going on. You can perhaps even take the pitch out at this point and just give it some rhythms to play with. Which again is really great when it comes to modulation. So what we're getting here is this extraordinary movement, this cascade of sound, similar to what you might get out of a zaps or a DFAM, an ever-changing step-by-step evolution into something else. And when you pick that out within the plasma voice, it's just mesmerizing. I mean, when you push it to the right, you get all this percussive stuff going on. And it's just amazing. So I've got like the bank over here. If I keep it in that direction, I get this percussive explosion. Bring the time down and it defines it that little bit better. I've got some effects in the background from the Echo Cinematic, which is just dragging the tails of it about the place, which I'm just leaving in because it's so interesting. So you can explore and find the percussive bit that you want by varying that pitch input and the CV input in order to find that little bit. But if you want something with a little bit more melody to it, just push it to the left to drag that bank across, and it will start finding those bass and lead sounds. It's a complete riot. It really is. You can just play and play and play and mess and muck it about and keep on pulling out more and more of this energy and this spark. I mean, in some places there's nowhere to go because it's so full and overflowing at all times. Is that useful? Yeah, no, I kind of think it is. I'm still trying to work out how best to carve it in. I mean, sometimes it overwhelms, so you can't exactly hear other bits. But there's 100 different reasons why that might be going on in your rack. But its range of frequencies, I suppose, its impact on what's going on can be huge. But you can also, with the use of the filter and bringing the flux in and out, you can also find its way into bits that make it pop out suddenly within what you're doing. So, I mean, to finish off, I'm going to plug in a keyboard, and just to see, can I pull sweetness out of that, I guess is my question. I'm going to run it through a few effects and see whether we can find something beautiful within it. Let's go back to a bit more of a bassy sort of sound. So the answer to the question, can I find something beautiful, is probably no. Well, the plasma voice, then. Was that a fair representation? I don't have any idea. I think so. I think so. So what is it then amongst all of this mush and this distortion? Well, it is all of that. It's the wonderful overflowing of mud within the murkiness of a distorted out, glitched, energized kind of soundscape of nowhere you ever want to be. It has an extraordinary ability to cut through. It has this overwhelmingness that I think I've spoken about before, which is in danger absolutely of overwhelming stuff. I mean, when you stick it into things, everything else has to fit around it. But then that's part of the artistry, I think, in finding its place within stuff. It likes to be alone, I think. But then when you start layering on stuff, it just becomes this intense mash of, I don't know, quite a lot of gorgeousness, I would say. I was able to find some loveliness within just playing it with a few effects. Yeah, no, totally, it's got that in there. Sure, it doesn't have the long lead ups to stuff. It's instantly there. But you can calm the fizz and the spit. You can sort of massage it away a little bit. And then it comes back unexpectedly as it needs to, because there's this build-up of stuff that it just needs to release. It like has this overarching desire to get itself out there. And we should let it, I think. So yeah, that's the plasma voice and Gamechanger audio. That's absolutely definitely going into sort of my permanent case. I'm playing an EMOM on Thursday in like a couple of days, which will probably be over by the time I've edited this together. But it's definitely going to form a massive part of that set. So I'm going to spend the next day or so just trying to sort that out. It's been a huge amount of fun to play with. And what I really like that ability to throw it one way and then the other. So to use it as this solid, squelchy, energy-laden bass line and then throw it over to percussion. That is, I think, a real interesting thing. It means I'm not switching to two different modules to try to do something similar. I can do it all within the same one. That gives me an element of versatility, an element of transition, of movement from one thing to another, which is rare. Because so often a module does a thing, whereas this is capable of doing all sorts of different things. So, immense versatility, but within the confines of something which is always going to be spitting at you. So versatility within its own limited range of application, you could say. But heck, that thing just sounds amazing. So I hope that was helpful. Do come and join us on Patreon, all that kind of stuff. Subscribe, you know the drill. Share the video, tell people about it. Come along to Patreon and join our little merry band of people who really get a kick out of talking about synthesizers and modular and want to support the work that I do in trying to highlight and give an honest and authentic appraisal of the bits and bobs they have in front of them. I should add that Gamechanger already did send this to me, and thank you very much for doing that. But they haven't paid me or anything to make a video. And as I say, I haven't for about 4 months. So good for them for speculatively sending the odd module out to idiots like myself who take a bit of time to get it together enough to do a video on it. So thanks for that. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.